Documentary, Crohn's and Colitis Hidden Disease, production I was involved in 1990. Production, research, camera. Check it out, it's well worth a look. Crohn's and Colitis, the hidden disease.
This inflammatory bowel disease is a serious illness with at least 8,000 sufferers in Ireland alone. Two forms of the disease are Crohn's and colitis, and because of the nature of the disease, it's very hard to raise finance or public interest. You might call them the hidden diseases, as sufferers often fear ridicule and embarrassment and even discrimination in the workplace. The following 4 interviews demonstrate the debilitating effects it has on the lives of the sufferers and their families.
I was first diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 1971. I was 21 years of age at the time. Prior to this, I had no previous illnesses, so I had nothing wrong with me. I was leading a normal, healthy life at the time, as any normal teenager or adolescent of 21 would be leading. When I started having this intermittent diarrhea, ongoing diarrhea for about 1 month, 2 months, maybe 3 months at a time. They had narrowed it down at that time to 3 major things which it could be. One was cancer. The second thing was a thing called Hodgkin's disease, which affects the lymph glands, or it could be Crohn's disease. At that time, he introduced me to a surgeon by the name of Harold Brown, who recommended what they call a laparotomy. Now, a laparotomy is an opening of the intestines to try and locate what would happen, because up to then the tests were being at conflict with one another. Some of them were showing that it was Crohn's disease, others were indicating cancer, and some were indicating that the lymph system could be wrong, there could be some blood disorder which could be causing it. They did this laparotomy operation, and they took a part of my bowel away for biopsy. And following the biopsy, they then had confirmed that I had Crohn's disease. Well, my immediate reaction was one of relief that I hadn't got cancer. But the second one was Crohn's disease. I'd never heard of this illness called Crohn's disease. Yeah, you pick it out of a medical book, what was it? What was it going to mean to my lifestyle? Was it going to change my whole fabric of life? I'd never heard of an illness. I don't know. I was confused. That would be the easiest way possible putting it, that I was totally confused by it. What I was going to do, how I was going to live with this illness.
Well, Crohn's disease is a chronic disease of the intestinal wall and can affect both the small and the large intestines. The inflammation can affect all layers of the intestinal wall. The symptoms can include diarrhea, abdominal pain, rectal bleeding and fever. Current medication can really help just to control both of these diseases, and while surgery for Crohn's may help, it's not considered a cure, as the disease often reoccurs near the site of the resection.
It switched me from being a radical to being a very conservative. I went into myself. My whole life went on Crohn's disease. The fact that I wanted to be cured of it, this disease had got to me. It inhibited me in the sense that you couldn't do the things that other people were doing at that time. You couldn't have the late nights. I hadn't got the energy for the late nights. You couldn't go drinking. I wasn't a great drinker. I couldn't drink. Where the pub scene, the cabaret scene, and all these places, things were happening. I had to restrict myself, because I knew if I did let myself go, I'd be in trouble. I'd be back to where I originally was, and I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to go back to the time when the perforation happened, when I nearly died. I was totally Crohn's disease orientated. Yeah, I felt a little bit hard done by at that time, because I was a great fan of the show band era around the the late 60s, early 70s. Some great bands, the Freshmen, the Platymen, the Chessmen. There were some great bands. I used to travel around with them. I used to follow them around. It was at that time we had come from what you would call ballroom music to what they call progressive music, and some of these bands now are beginning to do great American stuff which had come on stream. And when I got Crohn's disease, yeah, I feel I missed out during 5-6 years, that period. I think I would have got involved in the music scene in some shape or form during that period. The great thing I find about being a postman and being out on the road is I have my own delivery to do. It's my route. I can tailor it to my needs. If I don't feel too good this morning, if Crohn's disease is acting up on me, if I've had a bad dose of diarrhea the night before and come into work at 6 o'clock and you don't feel too good, you can do it at your leisure.
Stuart got very ill coming up to about 2 years ago. He couldn't eat. He was in the loo all the time with diarrhea, got very bad pains in his stomach, and eventually after a couple of weeks he also was vomiting. We had taken him to the doctor many times and he was felt he had some sort of a stomach bug or gastroenteritis. So eventually, after about 3 months, we got him to the hospital and he was diagnosed after a fortnight as having Crohn's disease.
We were told that it wasn't hereditary, but it's possible it was genetic. Now, how we view genetic and hereditary, where's the difference lie? I mean, we've tried to decipher exactly what, if it is genetic, does that not link up with hereditary? So it's one of these situations that it's rather difficult to understand. His condition has stabilized now, or did eventually, when they discovered and diagnosed him as having Crohn's. They put him on a lot of medication, steroids, inflammatory tablets, various other things, and he was stabilized for a while. Since then, he has been keeping really reasonably well, if one could describe it as such, till he finally had another flare-up there within the last couple of weeks, around Christmas time.
Stuart, in fact, lost, I would imagine, about 2 stone in the time before he was diagnosed. The weight literally fell off him. To me, he looked like pictures I've seen of children in Belsen concentration camp, and that's not an exaggeration. He went that thin. In fact, he has photographs that he took of himself and of other children in the hospital at the time, and I shudder when I see them because he looked so thin in them. Not that he's much fatter now, but he looks a bit better than he did at that stage. He was like a scarecrow, really.
There's Ronald McDonald, me, and carry on.
Yes, Stuart was out of school a lot in the time that he was sick, before he was diagnosed. He might be in for a day and he'd be out for a week and in for another 2 days. And one day I remember that I spoke to his teacher to say that he was sick and wouldn't be in again for another while, and he said that he had noticed that he was ill. And in fact, his job at that time with another boy was to collect the projector from the safe and bring it over to the classroom when it was needed. And in fact, he enjoyed doing this job. It made him, he felt very important. But he had actually asked the teacher to take him off the job and give the job to some other boy, because he literally hadn't the strength to go over and carry the projector back. The teachers in the school had noticed, in fact, that he was ill, and it was said to me in the school.
Researchers don't know what causes Crohn's disease or colitis. They do not believe that disease is caused by emotional stress or by food, and nor is it directly transmitted from one person to another. They do know that it affects males and females equally, and that it's primarily a disease of the young. Most cases of inflammatory bowel disease are diagnosed before the age of 30.
So it's so difficult to explain how Stuart was losing weight so quickly. He went from a very, I would imagine, strong, stout little boy to finally, within a couple of weeks, literally, a child that was unable to stand, so frail, he was unable to stand on his own two legs, and didn't want to do anything, had no interest whatsoever in anything outside of just sitting and lolling, sitting on the chair with arm under chin as such.
The inflammatory bowel disease that I suffer from is ulcerative colitis of the left side. Now there are different types of colitis, but mine is on the left side, which would affect the colon, part of the rectum and the small bowel. I'm 31 years of age. I've 10 or 11 years service with the civil service with no sick leave. A couple of years ago, a man fell into the Liffey and I was involved in the particular rescue in the Liffey. I went into the Liffey, it was a wet and cold day, I swallowed a lot of water. I was in the Liffey for quite some time, 14 or 15 minutes. After a couple of weeks I noticed that I kind of got gastroenteritis, diarrhea, that type of thing. I put that down to my swim in the Liffey. So I went down to my local chemist, got the usual bottle of KO Pectoline and Imodium and things like that to stop diarrhea in a couple of days. Usually you take these when you go on a sun holiday. It cleared the condition for a couple of days, but about a week afterwards I was basically back to square one. Went to my GP, told him the story of my dive into the River Liffey. He put me on a course of tablets which are for if you pick up bugs, bacterial infection, which seemed to work for about a month, and I was quite pleased and finished off the tablets. But again, in a very short time I was back to diarrhea. Only the complication this time was that I had diarrhea with rectal bleeding and mucus and things like that, which worried me quite considerably. So I went back to my GP and I was referred to a specialist in this particular field. I was in these 2 to 3 weeks, extremely worried, got very depressed. I really genuinely thought that I had cancer of the bowel, which is a million times more serious than inflammatory bowel disease. But eventually I got the results back as Crohn's disease, which absolutely shattered me. I was put on the course of tablets which are the same for ulcerative colitis as they are for Crohn's, which is a drug called slazoparine, which relatively cleared the condition in a short while after 3 or 4 months. And I was taken off the tablets, no subsequent problems for a couple of weeks. After a relatively short time off the medication, I was back to square one with rectal bleeding or whatever. I was referred to a second consultant where I went through basically the same tests, only a bit more extensive. And I was diagnosed as having ulcerative colitis of the left side.
Colitis causes ulceration of the inner lining of the colon and the rectum. And of the two bowel diseases, it's the most treatable. The symptoms are really quite similar to those of Crohn's, with diarrhea, rectal bleeding, abdominal pain and fever. Surgical removal of the entire colon and rectum can provide a permanent cure, and this procedure is known as an ileostomy, where the ileum is directly connected to the abdominal wall.
The course of treatment was very successful. I would certainly encourage people who have inflammatory bowel disease. I've led a normal life once I got the initial tests over. It's particularly an initial worry if you're married or you have a family or whatever. I know when I was, my present wife Catherine, when I was doing a particular line, people thought I was very abnormal. I spent half my time out in the loo and the other half wondering where was the next toilet after that, which was particularly embarrassing. But once the disease is monitored regularly and controlled by a specialist, there's no reason why you can't swim and run and carry out your job in the bank or in the building society or the civil service or whatever area that you work in. There are no limitations.
I'm suffering from Crohn's disease. I've had it for the last 22 years. I had 9 operations for it. Now they say it's not hereditary, but there's 3 members of the family that have suffered from it. My sister, my niece and myself. What they do is that when you get a bad bout of your complaint, they have to take you in and take part of the colon away. But unfortunately when they joined it again, mine grew diseased. Now at the moment I'm still attending. I'm going through a bad patch at the moment with it. The first thing in the morning, I must run to the toilet, and that could go on 4 or 5 times before I can take my treatment. I take codeine phosphate, therefore to ease down the diarrhea. I take prednisolone. That's to get to the inflammation of the bowel. I take Maxilon is to keep my tummy from getting sick. I take Tegomit. I have an ulcer. I have to take that. I take Pethidine. It's a sort of, it helps you relax when you're going to bed. I also am after being put on it for the morning time. So it means if you're going anywhere, you must get up about 2 hours before you actually have to go out. And then you could go out and you'd be still caught out that you'd be running for a toilet. So mostly I stay at home. I don't go anywhere. As I say, I go to the shops and that and back, but they're not far away. Now I go into a neighbour for a chat and I might be standing there talking to her and I have to leave her. Now, if you go into town and that, I have to make sure I know where all the toilets are, which I do. I think it came to a stage people thought I was an alcoholic. I was in so many pubs. But there can be funny sides to it, you know, certain things. But then there's some sad sides to it as well. I met a little girl, 12 years of age, that suffered very, very bad with it. And unfortunately, she ended up with ileostomy, you know, and at 12 years of age is a bit sad. My husband, Christy, he is very understanding. He's been very supportive in the last 22 years. When I'm in hospital, he's up all the time with me. And he does a lot of the heavy work in the house. And he often has to go out for the shopping and that, so I don't be able to go out. So it's great to have a husband like that. That's what we're on about. The younger generation, will they get someone that'll understand?